Good morning. We are the Gedders.
Tim,
Gertrud.
And Eliana.
we're enjoying church online, but we really do miss getting together.
I miss children's church and rotate with all the other kids.
We are all teaching or studying from home.
The Lord is our shepherd. We have everything we need.
Hello, church family. I'm Mary Jeanette Cook. I just want to tell you how blessed I've been to be able to connect with so many people, mostly in the church, but not all, through all this technology. Being one of the most untechy people I've ever known, I have been brave, and thanks to the patience and the gracious teaching from my family, my grandchildren, and my friends, I can actually visit with people online, and that is such a blessing. God is so good to let us do this. So keep going, church family. I love you. I miss you.
Good morning. I'm Pastor Milt, one of the staff here at North Fresno Church. If this is your first time joining our online worship service, we'd like to welcome you. You can find out more about North Fresno on our website, northfresnochurch.org. We want to thank you for your faithfulness in giving during this season of not meeting together. Your generosity during this time makes ongoing ministry in our community possible. There are a number of ways to give, especially during this season when we are not meeting in person. We are excited about our youth pastor candidate, Brad Isaac. If you haven't yet had opportunity to meet Brad, you can check our website for videos. And later in this morning's service, you will receive instructions on the voting process. Tonight, we will be celebrating and thanking Pastor Cheryl for her consummate leadership with a drive-by thank you in the North Fresno Church parking lot from 6:30 to 8 p.m. Please come, drive by, and show your appreciation for all of Pastor Cheryl's hard work this past year. This morning, we look forward to hearing from Dan Macloskie, who will be presenting the message. Dan is a familiar face to many of us here at North Fresno Church, having just worked as an intern at the church for this past season. He served previously as a youth pastor for 8 years at a church in Manitoba and is currently a full-time seminary student at Fresno Pacific Biblical Seminary. Dan writes, "My family greatly enjoyed our time with NFC, and we are now living back up in Manitoba, where I am finishing off my seminary classes online and looking into ministry opportunities." We look forward to hearing your message this morning, Dan. And finally, you are invited to join us after the service to connect and pray together in Zoom rooms. You can find the link for those rooms in Pastor Cheryl's Friday email. Let's pray together. Lord of summer sunshine and autumn harvest, be with us this day as we gather to encounter your word and your way for us. Remind us that we can place our trust in your eternal love. Enable us to be more effective in our witness to that love by word and deed. Guide our steps and pick us up when we falter. Dust us off and place us on the pathways of grace and service. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
I will worship. Well, good morning, North Fresno Church. I'm Aaron Weens, and I'm joined today by Grace Isaac and Daniel Neufeld. And Grace and Daniel are not only a part of our North Fresno youth group, they were also a part of the youth pastor search team, and they did an amazing job. So today we just wanted to give you all an update on this last week of candidating and how the voting will work after today's service.
Good morning. We've had a great past week as Brad's candidated for the youth pastor position. He's been able to meet quite a few of our congregation as well as joining our pastors and staff. He also had a chance to be part of our Wednesday night youth group Zoom to hang out with the students a bit and the volunteer staff.
Yeah, so today is the day we all get to vote to affirm Brad as the next youth pastor at NFC. After the service, you will receive an email with a link to a Survey Monkey. We encourage all members of your family to vote. Voting will be from the end of the service until 5 this evening. There will also be a phone number to call in the email if you prefer to vote that way. Remember, voting ends at 5.
Thanks, Grace and Daniel. If you do not receive an email with a link and you would like to vote, please email youthpastorsearch@northfresnochurch.org. That should be somewhere down here on the bottom if you forget. So youthpastorsearch@northfresnochurch.org. After voting closes at 5 this evening, we will tabulate the results and send out an announcement with those results as soon as we can. So thanks again, and don't forget to vote, and voting ends at 5 o'clock today. Thanks.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, Jesus. Jesus is the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. When darkness seems to hide his face, I rest on his unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. His oath, his covenant, his blood supports me in the whelming flood. When all around my soul gives way, he then is all my hope and stay. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. When he shall come with trumpet sound, oh, may I then in him be found, dressed in his righteousness alone, faultless to stand before the throne. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand.
Good morning, North Fresno Church. I want to ask a question to start our minds rolling today. In the season that we're in, if you were to characterize your relationship with God as one of the games that kids play, which one would it be most like? Would you imagine a game of tag? Maybe some kind of board game, perhaps Guess Who, or maybe Sorry? How about 20 Questions, or the classic pool game Marco Polo? The comparison occurred to me the other day as we played with some balloons. Some time ago, some family members of mine came home from a trip to find hundreds of balloons in their basement. Now, I think this scenario is one where you belong to either one camp or another. One type of person sees this and thinks, wow, this is amazing, so much fun, so much potential, tons of great games to be played, a really cool experience. I'm in that camp, and so are my kids. The other camp would be those who find the idea of a room full of balloons to be kind of terrifying. It has the vibe of something like maybe the clown version of the movie Jaws. Who knows what's beneath the surface? Did you know that the fear of balloons is called globophobia? In a sea of balloons, what you need to really play, though, is hide and seek. I'd crawl beneath the surface and then lay still, and my kids, Liam or Ashlyn, would come and try to discover where I was hiding. It was great. But it got me thinking about this idea of ways of relating to God and how it can be a bit like this. We may experience some uncertainty, some doubt or surprise. He's in there somewhere, but where? Or maybe has he snuck out? And in a world filled with ash and fire, health concerns, so much injustice, a new type of school year, and this little election coming up, is God hiding somewhere in the mess of what's going on in the world right now? How or where can we find him? Is there some kind of strategy to this? If we call Marco, will we hear Polo back somewhere? Maybe you've been asking these questions in this situation. Certainly people around you have been. Pressing issues lead to big questions about God. Is God there, powerful? Is he good? Does faith have something relevant to speak to my life today? As the world and the church struggle with real questions, one approach that we have often taken is to follow the path of the great philosopher Olaf the Snowman. Are you familiar with his work? You can find it in the Disney Plus section of your online viewing library. In the movie Frozen 2, our friend Olaf the Snowman is experiencing an existential crisis, and faced with growing up and the complexity that it brings, as he experiences uncertainty, some particularly crazy events, his response is to blissfully sing a song with the refrain, "This will all make sense when I am older." Somehow, though, we don't get it right now. But there must be a reason and a logical explanation, right? And it's just a bit beyond my grasp at this point, but someday I'll get it. Sound familiar? And so, if we're willing to venture with a faith that moves beyond a Disney version, we don't avoid these big, difficult questions. So the big question I want to ask this morning starts back with that feeling that you might have if you were playing hide and seek in the balloons with God. Today, where is God, and what can I expect to happen if I encounter him? This morning, I want to suggest that there's a pattern that runs through God's word time and again in God's interactions with people. And while characters and settings change, that there are some dependable trends that we see over and over. In the second book of the Bible, titled Exodus, it tells the story of how God rescues and leads his people out of slavery in Egypt and into the Promised Land. These Hebrew people had settled in Egypt as honored guests, but things have changed. As we know, new national leadership often brings big changes in policy. Last week, Lynn Jost highlighted themes of naming and of political implications of choosing the path of life. And these lead up to our text this morning. So into the story continues the character Moses, a Hebrew who is adopted and raised in the Egyptian royal household. As an adult, he kills a citizen of the empire and flees to exile in the wilderness, where he finds a home among the people there. In Exodus chapter 3, we find this fascinating story of God calling Moses by means of an unusual messenger. Let's spend a bit of time looking at the text there, from Exodus chapter 3. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. So here we have Moses, the educated former prince, living in exile and working as a shepherd when he first hears God's voice in the desert. As I imagine this scene, the heat, the dust, the strange sight of the bush that burns but isn't burned up, what does that look like in your mind? The bush itself is not uncommon, neither is fire for that matter, except for the fact that the bush isn't consumed. So the angel of the Lord has Moses' attention and speaks to him from the flames. The term angel of the Lord is used in other places, and it's interpreted as God himself rather than some particular created angel. And Moses responds, but to this point, there's no indication that Moses knows who it is that he's dealing with. Verse 5, "Do not come any closer," God said. "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." Then he said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob." At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. In this part 2 of the interaction, God begins to define who Moses is dealing with. God uses the concept of being holy, set apart, and also identifies as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the national patriarchs of the past. Now, if you're familiar with your Bible heroes, this might be a familiar list, and one that Moses sort of slides into himself. But remember that Moses has been raised in Pharaoh's house. Jewish tradition and reading the text suggests that Moses probably knew to some extent about his Hebrew heritage, but his life has mostly been one of a prince. These are his people, but they aren't really his people. And these are the ones that God is identifying with. Verse 7, "The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey." Verse 10, "So now go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God said, "I will be with you, and this will be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain." As the back and forth continues, God is starting to get down to business. The people are crying out, "How can our people be in this kind of state? If God is for us, why doesn't he do something about this mess? Where is the justice? Where is the destiny and the blessing?" This isn't what we expected things to look like. And God begins laying out his plan to act, to deliver, to rescue. Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites, 'I am has sent me to you.'" God also said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, 'The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation." Moses wants to know what happens if God of your fathers isn't going to cut it by way of knowing who this God is. Sorry, but maybe they won't take my word for it. What do we call you? Back and forth, God answers Moses' concerns by showing more of the plan and more of himself. The name "I am who I am," the title of the Lord, Yahweh, which becomes a primary name for God for his people, comes from this very text. I am who I am. But what does that even really mean? Why such a cryptic name? Why doesn't God give himself a normal title that people can just use? These are topics that scholars have explored and written volumes about for years, looking for clarity. A lot can and has been said about this name of God. And as this conversation between God and Moses ping-pongs around, God focuses the interaction from far away to near, from general to specific, from unknown to personal. And looking at this text, while some things are really specific to the story, I think we can see in it a model for some of the ways that we see God at work beyond Moses in the desert. Because while this is the only burning bush situation that I know about, there are strong parallels to how God acts in other places in the Bible, and perhaps with you and I today as well. I think you could break it down a lot of different ways, but I'd like to suggest 3 trends in how God interacts with people. In 1508 to 1512, the artist Michelangelo painted the famous ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, over 40 meters long and covered with panels of complex scenes. It's pretty amazing. Can you imagine, though, even physically painting like that? For 4 years? Michelangelo wrote a poem with lines in it like these gems. My brush above me all the time dribbles paint so my face makes a fine floor for the droppings. Every gesture I make is blind and aimless. My skin hangs loose below me, my spine's all knotted up from folding over itself. I am in the wrong place. I am not a painter. Wow. Despite the challenges, though, perhaps the most famous image from this ceiling is titled The Creation of Adam. If you don't know it by name, you most likely are familiar with the image. This image, or maybe just that of the hands nearly touching, is burned into my mind as an illustration of the first point, and it's this: God reaches first. God reaches first. In creation, God initiates. With people, God makes the first move time and again. For Moses, we see this in the way that God calls to him, rescues him, reassures him, and brings him back into the story once more. After all, the story of Moses could have ended with him as a shepherd in the desert. But God reaches first. Moses wasn't out praying and fasting, searching for God. He was caring for sheep. Through the pages of Scripture, God reaches out. Maybe you've had the experience where you texted someone and then were left waiting, not knowing if the person has read your text or not, or when they're going to respond, or if they will. The first text is always God's. He reaches first. God consistently acts in love to bridge the gap from his side, making the way for people to respond. Second one, if God reaching out is the first action, the second trend is that God consistently shows who God is. God becomes more and more personal. God answers Moses' questions of identity by using the name, I am who I am, or I will be who I will be. We know that names carry meaning. In the culture of this text, even more than they do now. I know that my name, Daniel, means God is my judge. But this has very little impact on my day-to-day identity. Mostly, it's just the name of what I'm called. But God does something really interesting here. Rather than a title or a nickname for identifying, God uses a name to get much more personal, to allow people to know him in a unique way. Imagine a lake where there's depth and content of the water itself, but there are also shores that mark out the shape. Now, I won't venture into the deep waters of God's title today itself, but the shores marked out by the name God gives to Moses begin to say, this is who I am, but also this is who I'm not. On the one side, God's pattern is to be a God who is known, a God who exists, is knowable in action, character, and reliability, not just a vast Star Wars force, a cosmic good, or something like that. This is a specific being who we can know. The other side of the name is the truth that God is not confined or limited by a title. In Egypt, Israel was surrounded by gods who had names, particular names that had to do with their role. There's so many in Egypt, you probably know some of them. Names that are associated with God of the sun, God of the Nile, God of war, and on and on. And we give something a name like that, we are accomplishing something more than just naming it, though. In that kind of a name, a title, we define and confine its role. There's control and there's limitation. This is the God who does this, but not the God who does that. We can understand and therefore feel some control. But God says, you can call me I am. You can know me, but you won't be able to put me into those same categories that you're used to. I am is personal, and yet it's huge and mysterious and beyond our attempts to harness it for our own purposes. When we try to set up these categories and say this is exactly how God is, we try to confine God using boundaries that we've created. The lakeshore idea, it's not a perfect metaphor, but it reminds us that God is both known and beyond us, bigger than any one theological viewpoint, any one political stance, any one author, leader, or pastor. We can relate to God because God shows himself to be personal. And the third part of the pattern builds on the first two, because if God reaches out first, and if God gets personal with who he is and how he's going to be, then we can expect that God will act to bring about his plan. For Moses and the Israelites, encounter with God leads to deliverance from slavery and being led toward the promised land. The story of the Passover and Exodus are perhaps the central narrative in history of the Jewish people. It identifies them. It is a theological core to what they believe. Their theology emphasizes that God is a God who sees our situation, who hears, drawing outsiders in, acts in mighty power to save and to deliver. This is the one who will fight for the people, who lead the people, restore the people. These are the central points of a Jewish narrative. From the start, Scripture paints a picture of a God with a purpose, a God on a mission, whose story carries through history with key points along the way. The Exodus is one. But the pattern holds true that through hardship, in spite of defeat, beyond explanation, God's purposes move forward and will be fulfilled. God will act, and God will act in line with who God is. 3 parts to the pattern. God reaches out, God's personal, and God will act to bring about the plan. We see it all over. Think of the way that God interacts with Adam and Eve. Reaching out, personal, plan. We see it in the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses comes into that line, but he's not the end of it. We see it in how God communicates with prophets through prophets, even through the story of a talking donkey. We see it in the early church with the Holy Spirit, and on and on. But perhaps the greatest example of this pattern comes in the life and work of Jesus himself. In Jesus, we see God reaching out first to humanity. We see God defining and displaying most clearly who he is, and sometimes more surprisingly, who he's not. And of course, we see the way that God acts to bring about his plan of salvation and restoration in Jesus, in line with his character all along. And that thread, from the beginning, carries on to us today. This pattern invites us to find ourselves in the long line of those who could relate to God. When faced with questions of knowing him, I wonder if we sometimes wish that we could encounter a burning bush of our own. But then I wonder, if we did, would we find the answers that we're looking for? The writer Andy Crouch draws a really helpful distinction here as we wrap things up. He writes about heading into the year 2020. The Economist magazine published an edition focusing on predictions for the coming year. To look back now on what predictions were made by these experts, it reminds us that even with well thought through models, nobody predicted the dramatic events that would happen in the coming months. And yet, we love to predict things. From the weather to traffic patterns to market conditions, some we predict relatively well, others not so much. 2020 has reminded us that prediction has its limits, and ultimately it is a fragile way to live. An alternative way of facing uncertainty, as suggested by Crouch, and modeled to us by the way that God interacts with us, is a path of promise. The dependable action of God is not that a set of stone, it's not that of a set in stone path of prediction, but rather one of covenant love and relationship. Imagine with me a bride and groom standing together at the altar. They use words like for richer and poor, in sickness and in health, as they make a promise to one another. Standing there, they have little information about the details of the future circumstances that could inform a really solid prediction of what will happen. Based on my calculations, I predict I will stay committed to you. Predictions give the idea of certainty or control, but promise carries much more weight. It makes sense that covenant promise is an image that God uses to describe how he relates to us. So we most likely won't have any burning bush moments this morning, but let me invite you to consider the invitation to engage with God this morning through the same pattern. Maybe the invitation is to simply become aware of the ways that God is reaching out to you, making that first move. Maybe you're in a place where the invitation to you is a season of knowing Him more, allowing room for God to be both personal and beyond our boundaries, to experience something new. Or maybe the invitation is to see the ways that God is working, inviting you to join where He is already at work. May we have the courage to be that sort of people of God today. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your word that is alive and active, that you care for us and that you love us and that we can communicate with you. Thank you for North Fresno Church and for the season that they're in right now. Lord, I pray that you would speak to us clearly, that you would guide us and lead us. I pray for their new leadership and the transitions coming. Lord, I ask that you would bless them in your holy name, Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Dan, for sharing your words of encouragement to us. Thank you, everyone who is watching, but don't turn it off yet. We have just one more thing that we'd like to do, and that is we have some words of thank you that we would like to give to our interim administrative pastor, Cheryl Dewick-Smith. She has served this last year faithfully and wonderfully as we have been in a year of transition, in a lead pastor search process, and next week Pastor Dustin begins, but we would be remiss if we did not take some time to thank Cheryl for all of the wonderful work that she has done. She has felt this was a calling by God to serve our community, to serve our staff, to serve our church family, and so we thank her for the wonderful work that she has done this past year. First, she has some words of encouragement that she would like to give to us on this final Sunday. And then we have a few words that people have recorded, words of thanks and encouragement to her. So we hope that you will stay and listen to those. And we hope that if you haven't heard already, tonight on our North Fresno Church campus from 6:30 to 8, we would invite you to a drive-by thank you. If you'd like to come, say hello to Pastor Cheryl, give her a gift or a card, just if you'd like to show your appreciation, you are welcome to come by. So Pastor Cheryl, as well as the staff, will be there, social distanced and masked, of course, but we will be there from 6:30 to 8 if you'd like to come by and say thank you.
It has been quite a year, like nothing I could have ever imagined last September when I felt led to step into this role. I have been blessed to serve alongside an amazing team of staff and pastors. I am grateful for the guidance and wisdom of the Leadership Board and the Spiritual Ministries Committee. And I'm thankful for all of you, the NFC congregation, for the encouraging notes that I found picketed on my yard one morning, for the cards and for the prayers, for the jars of jam that have been given to me, for the challenges and the conversations that we've had along the way. I did my best to serve faithfully, to hold down the fort, to assess the organizational gaps that I saw and to pass those along to the leadership board, to put out fires, not literally, thank goodness, to make plans and then to have them all scrapped due to the world shifting with COVID-19. I've done my best to listen and love, lead and guide. I am grateful for the graciousness that you have extended to me when I have been clueless, and for the forgiveness that you have given when I have made errors along the way as well. I just want to say it has been a privilege for me to serve as your pastor this year. So thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl, for your leadership and for serving at NFC the last several months. I have appreciated so much your organization and clarity and things that you have brought to the table and your administrative skills that I just think we really needed and appreciate. And I also have appreciated your pastoral heart and how much you have brought the Holy Spirit into the work that you've been doing. Thank you so much.
In this interim season, we have been so grateful that God saw fit to give us both a pastor and a counselor. Thank you for your empathy and your ability to hold difficult things in tension for us. We're grateful for your counseling ability as well as your teaching ability.
Thank you, Pastor Cheryl.
Cheryl, you joined us about a year ago on staff, and what a year it's been. Specifically, just trying to unlock mysteries around the office here of things that nobody seemed to know how to do. Dealing with the coronavirus, of course, was a major one. Not having church services and many other things like that. I'm sure that you know better than I what all you've dealt with, but you're amazing, and we're just grateful for all you've done. I think you came in here, and from the looks of it, from where I stand at least, you just kind of dealt with everything head on and cruised through each challenge, and we're just grateful to have been able to work with you. So thank you very much, and you'll be missed.
Thanks, Cheryl, for all you've done for us this past year. Much of what you've done has been behind the scenes, and we really appreciate all you've done to help us navigate so many things, including how to be the church during a pandemic. Thank you again.